I think if I were to ask you what kind of church you wanted to be a part of, you'd probably say you wanted to be a part of a church that was alive, a church that was healthy, a church that's sound. Because I think that's what most of us want to be a part of. And it certainly, and we kind of talked a little bit about this in the morning class, there are many, many congregations and churches throughout our country that are sick, that are dying. Outwardly, they may look very alive and they may look very healthy, but on the inside they have a sickness. And that sickness is causing them to die spiritually. So how can I know what a healthy church looks like? Is there a picture of one in the New Testament? Is there a pattern for us to follow? This morning we're going to look at a pattern of what a healthy church looks like. What a really living church is to look like. And that pattern is left for us in Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12 will be our blueprint this morning to see what kind of church we're a part of. Romans chapter 12. And we'll be looking at that entire chapter and breaking it into three parts. Three parts. And all of this will focus on what a healthy, sound, alive church really looks like. And since we know a church is made up of members, then when we talk about what a healthy church is, we're going to talk about what a healthy Christian is. What a healthy member of that healthy church is. The first thing we're going to see is in the first two verses, and that is that everyone in a healthy church is dedicated to the Lord. Everyone. In Romans chapter 12, the first two verses, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Why are the members dedicated? Why are they committed? This verse tells us it's because of the mercies of God. In other words, if you're a part of a healthy church, the members there understand that everything they have is because of God's mercy. And they don't deserve any. So these people go around understanding how blessed they are of God. They understand and realize and live by and are encouraged by the fact that God has done so much for them. Like John said in 1 John 4:19, we love Him because He first loved us. That's why. So healthy Christians are motivated by the fact that God has done so much for them. And they realize that, and that's how they live. That causes them to do what? That causes them in a healthy church to be living sacrifices. That's what he says. We present our bodies a living sacrifice. So if you want to know if you're in a healthy church, those dedicated, committed members are daily sacrificing themselves. Remember what Paul says, I die daily. So a healthy living church is composed of people who die every day. A healthy living church is composed of people who die every day because they're sacrificing themselves every day. Earlier in this letter, Romans chapter 6, Paul addresses this in a slightly different way. Romans chapter 6, and let's notice two verses, verses 13 and verse 19. And we'll see in what way we're to be living sacrifices. Romans chapter 6, verse 13. Paul writes to the same people, and he tells them, do not present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to God as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. Then down in verse 19, I speak in human terms because of the weakness of your flesh. For just as you presented your members as slaves of uncleanness and of lawlessness, leading to more lawlessness, so now present your members as slaves of righteousness for holiness. It says that's how we are to be living sacrifices. So these churches that are alive are composed of people who do that very thing. They use what they have as instruments of righteousness. They're not engaged in acts of unrighteousness or acts of lawlessness, as he says. They sacrifice themselves daily on that altar. They don't do it just on Sundays. So a healthy church is composed of people who dedicate themselves every day to being living sacrifices, not just on Sundays. So when you look around and you look at a healthy church, you're going to see people who live their Christianity every single day, regardless of where they are and regardless of who they're with and regardless of where they are, what they're doing. So they are living sacrifices every single day. And these people, if they're really a part of a healthy, sound, alive church, they are being changed from the inside out every day. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. A healthy church is constantly renewing its mind. Every Christian is renewing their minds daily, daily, daily. They don't just come Sunday morning and think that's how they're going to renew their mind. It's something they're engaged in every day. So if we're going to be living sacrifices, it starts on the inside and works its way out. And as Paul told the church in Philippi, Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, we're to think on things that are pure and good and honest and trustworthy and of good report. Those are the type of things we dwell on and think about, meditate on, focus on. And only by doing that are we going to do the will of God, prove what is that good and perfect and acceptable will of God. So every church member, every member in a healthy, living, sound church is dedicated and they're committed. And ultimately, they're being transformed from the inside out. So when you look at yourself, when you look at other members of the congregation, you're going to see people that are different than they were a year ago. You're going to see people who are vastly different than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Why? Because they're being transformed from the inside out. And they're different now, and they're better now. Because they have made that conscious effort to be better. That's the first thing to look for in a healthy, sound church. The second thing that we see from our text is that everyone in a healthy church is using their abilities to keep the church healthy. Everyone. Beginning in verse 3. For I say through the grace given to me to everyone who is among you. See, this is to everyone. Not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function, so we, being many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that's given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches in teaching, he who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. How does a church stay healthy? That's how a church stays healthy, right there. Every single member is using what they have to keep the church healthy. 2 or 3 people aren't doing it by themselves. Why? Because they can't. They're not capable of it. So if you want to stay a part of a healthy, thriving, alive church, then that means you have personal responsibility to keep it healthy. You do. You can't look around and say it's everybody else's responsibility. It's your responsibility. Why? Because we all have, as he says here, differing abilities. Each of us. We have something to contribute to the health of this church. And if we don't use it, then that takes away from the health, the aliveness of the church. So feel that obligation. It's not just keeping you alive, it's keeping the church alive. And so we all have something to contribute. You know, a human body is healthy only if all of its parts are working together. Paul addressed this in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. He used a similar analogy there. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning in verse 21. Paul writes in talking about the unity of the body and how it has different members. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor, and our unpresentable parts have greater modesty. But our presentable parts have no need, but God composed the body, having given greater honor to that part which lacks it. That there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it, or if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Each member in a healthy church understands that they're not more valuable than anyone else, but that if the body's going to be healthy, every part, the hand, the feet, the eyes, every part has to work together, or that body will not be healthy, will not be sound, and will suffer because of it. So, the hand doesn't believe that the foot is less important. The eye doesn't believe that the hand is less important. But it's only when they all work together and realize their importance that the body is sound. We know if we lose a hand, we lose a foot, we lose an eye, we know that body is not like it needs to be. It's missing something. And so when we don't participate, when we don't add, when we don't use our talents and abilities, then the church is not as healthy as it should be, as it could be. Again, that's why each of us has responsibility. Each of us has something to contribute. And we build the church up that way. The person next to you, the person in front of you, the person behind you. Each of those people must be using what they have to edify, strengthen, build up the church. In Ephesians chapter 4, when Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, he stressed this. Ephesians chapter 4, and beginning with verse 15. Beginning in verse 15, Ephesians chapter 4, Paul writes, But speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into Him who's the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. Which parts are doing their part? All of them. Every single member must do their part. Every single member has talents and resources and opportunities and abilities, and they're to use them for the strengthening, the building up, the edifying of the church. And when one or two or three members don't, the health of the church suffers. And that's what he tells us. If we want the church to be as healthy as it can be, as alive as it can be, that means every single member is to do their part. And then lastly, the third part is that everyone in a healthy church is practicing love for each other. And instead of just saying that, Paul describes to the church at Rome and to us exactly what that looks like. What does it look like when every member is practicing love for each other? This is what Paul says it looks like. He says, let love be without hypocrisy. He says it's sincere, it's genuine. So when each member is actually showing love toward one another, it's real, it's not faked. It's genuine, it's sincere. They're not being hypocritical in their love. They really mean it. This is the type of love that comes from a pure heart, from a heart without guile. This is a healthy heart. It produces love. Now, he says, part of loving is hating. I know that sounds odd, but that's what he says. Part of loving is hating. He says, abhor or hate what's evil. Now, our physical bodies have to hate things if we're going to be healthy, don't we? Our bodies, our physical bodies have to hate certain things. We have to hate certain types of drugs. We have to hate alcohol. We have to hate all kinds of things if our bodies to stay healthy. We have to hate them. That's what he's saying here. If we want this congregation to be healthy and alive and thriving and sound, then we must hate certain things. Otherwise, those things will creep in and destroy it. So we have to hate false teaching. We have to hate hypocrisy. We have to hate apathy or laziness. In other words, as a healthy church, we must hate those things, abhor them, despise them. Why? Because they eat away at our health. That's why. So when we think about it like a physical body, we understand. We cannot let those things in to destroy the health of the church. Now, the other side is that we are to do what? We are to love everything that's good and cling to it. Like cling to it for our life. Everything that's good. And think about all the things that are good. There's a lot of really good things. And so when we find something good, we have to cling to it. Just like our physical bodies, when we find things that are good for us, whether it's in our diet or exercise or whatever, then we need to cling to it. Don't let it go. When we find things that are good for the spiritual health of this congregation, we need to cling to it. And do not let it go, whatever it is. He says, we're to love like Christ loves. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love. In honor, giving preference to one another. Not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer. Distributing to the needs of the saints and given to hospitality. Every one of us needs to be zealous. Needs to be involved in doing what's right for one another. In good works. In our daily lives. And just like Paul told the churches in Galatia, we can't grow tired or weary in doing this good. In doing these good works, we can't grow tired. We have to keep it up. He says, be diligent. Don't be lazy. Don't be apathetic. Understand it's important. Just like when we exercise our physical bodies or our minds, we have to be diligent. We can't just do it occasionally or it doesn't do any good. So it's something that's continual and constant and regular and patterned. And so we keep it up. We're diligent. And again, we're not apathetic, we're not lazy, but we're zealous in our Christian lives every single day. And then he says we are to want what's best for everybody, every single person. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Don't set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it's written, vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Members of a healthy church always want what's best for other people, regardless of who those other people are. Want what's best. And of course, ultimately, what's best for everyone is salvation. So, members of a healthy church are always wanting and being concerned about people who are not saved. Always. And we do whatever we can to help them come to a knowledge of Christ. And we're not concerned about avenging ourselves because God's going to take care of that. In other words, He's going to take care of every wrong. Now, when you think about it, going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, there's been a lot of wrongs. There's been a lot of injustices. There's been a lot of bad things done. God is going to take care of every single one of those. He won't miss a single one. And that's why He doesn't want me to do it, because I would mess it up. That's exactly why He doesn't want me to do it. I wouldn't do it right. Because He's perfect. He has perfect knowledge and perfect wisdom and knows everything that's ever happened. Then what He's going to do is perfect. It'll be the perfect result. Whereas I wouldn't. That's a snapshot of what a healthy church looks like. That's a snapshot. Everyone is committed and dedicated to the Lord. Everyone uses what they have, talents, abilities, resources, opportunities, to keep the church healthy. And then everyone, every single member, daily is practicing love for each other, is displaying love for each other, and displaying love for the world. That's a healthy church. That's a sound church. That's a church that's alive. And that's the kind of church He wants us to be a part of. And I think that's what everybody wants to be a part of, that type of church. Having a healthy, sound physical body takes time, work, effort. Well, much more so to have a spiritually healthy church. It will take time and effort, sacrifice, if we want to have a healthy, alive church. We're composed of the same body, each of us here. That's a part of the body of Christ. Each of us that has submitted to Christ, we've repented and been baptized. We were baptized into the one body, and so we're all part of that body. And if we want it to grow and be healthy and strong and alive, then each of us understands we have a responsibility to do just that very thing. This morning, the invitation is yours. You may need to respond to that great invitation. Listen to the words of this invitation song, and if you need to respond to that, we encourage you to come as we stand and sing.